Hi everybody, this is Anna Schusterman. I'm one of the two co-chairs for the College of Education Studies, and I'm going to walk you through the Ed Studies academic program to help you out with your planning. So we have a major and a minor. I'm going to walk you through both. They're overlapping, so if you're careful and strategic in your planning, you can actually take classes that apply to either the major or the minor, and then decide later whether you want to add the 5 extra classes that go with the major, or just stick with the original 5 classes that go with the minor. That's just a little helpful hint for planning ahead. The major is a linked major, so the most important thing you need to remember is to declare a first major. You can't declare just education studies. You have to have another major in addition. It can be anything you want, but you have to declare a first major, and only then can you declare ed studies. I'm going to walk you through the requirements. So one is a gateway course, which is a half-credit course in the second half of spring semester. So it's a 4th quarter class. This requirement is going to be waived for the class of 2021, which is going into their senior year. But for everybody else, this is going to be a requirement for the major as well as the minor. It's an introduction to who is in education studies at Wesleyan, what kind of research is going on campus, what kind of classes should you be looking out for, so that you have a sense not only of the fields, but of the opportunities that are available to you as an ed studies student at Wesleyan. So our assumption is that most students will declare education studies right in time for their 4th quarter in their sophomore year, and they'll take it at that time in sophomore year. If you declare your education studies major later, which is an option, there's no timeline requirements, then you can take it in your junior year. The next requirement is a foundations course, so there's 3 options. You can read all about them on the Ed Studies website, but they're basically schools and society, educational psychology, or social reproductions in the sociology department. So any one of those courses really gives you a broad look at the kinds of themes and arguments that are important in the field of education studies. You don't need to take it before you take the other courses in the major, but we do recommend that students try to take them earlier if they can, just because they give you that broad bird's eye look at what the field is about. Then we require everybody to take breadth courses, 1 in each category. So category 1 is cognitive, developmental, psychological foundations, classes like developmental psychology or psychological measurement. Category 2 is social, cultural, and historical foundations, so classes like schools and society or educational inequality, classes on history of education, things like that. And category 3 is research methods and statistics. So here we require a research methods course in a social science, so that you can learn either quantitative or qualitative or ethnographic or other types of research methods that are relevant and used in the field of education studies, or you can fulfill that credit by taking a statistics course so that you have a sense of how data are collected and analyzed and used. Then you get 3 electives in the major, and so you can pick any 3 more courses out of the ones that are in the foundations or the breadth categories. So you can choose to go broad and take another foundations course, maybe something in category 1 and something in category 2, or you can choose to focus your studies. Maybe you got really into sociology of education and you just want to put all of your chips there. You can take 3 more courses if you can find them, all in category 2. So electives is really choose your own adventure. You can pick how you want to do that. The one thing you can't do is double dip. So you can't count the same course for foundations and for, say, category 2 or category 1. You have to choose for any given course where in your listing it's going to apply, because you do have to, in the end, get 10 full credits. Broader context is really a class for, that's designed to help you think more broadly about what informs education studies. So why do we teach? Who do we teach? How do we teach? Why does the school day start at a certain time? Why is it off in the summer in most places in the United States? Why is the student composition what it is wherever it is? What are all the different forces that are acting on systems of education as they are? So you can choose courses from our pre-existing list, or you can think broadly about it and petition to count a different course, as long as you can make a justification and an argument for why that course helps you to think widely about the field of education. So the most important criteria for these is that you can connect it to education studies, but it's not explicitly about education. For example, you might take a class in African American history. So that class might not be about education, but it will certainly help you understand a lot of the forces that have created the shape of the American education system today. Or you might take a class like philosophy of science, which would help you think about how knowledge is constructed and how certain kinds of knowledge and systems of knowledge construction are elevated or not elevated in our canonical teaching. Or you might take something like computer programming, which a lot of people think is going to get added to reading, writing, and arithmetic as a core foundational competency that K-12 schools are going to start to expect from their students. So any of those you could easily justify, and we put those on our pre-existing list because we can see the argument very easily. But you can find a different course that's not on one of our lists and petition to count that one, as long as you can explain it. So feel free to be broad. The other thing to remember about the Wesleyan curriculum is that it's constantly changing, and so there's often courses that we're not aware of, they're not on our radar, and we don't know about them, and they would be really good candidates for broader contexts, and sometimes for some of the other categories, especially Category 1 and Category 2. So if you see a course at any time that's not on our pre-approved list, but you think it's a really good fit for one of those requirements, by all means bring it to our attention. You may do your peers a favor if we add it to our approved list, or we can have a conversation about you petitioning an override and whether that would be approved and why. The next two requirements are the pedagogy and practicum requirements. They go together to make 1 credit, but you can also split them up into 2 half-credit or equivalent experiences. So the pedagogy requirement is a half credit. It has to be in the form of an academic course. So it has to be a place where you're with a professor or an instructor and you're discussing theories of pedagogy, how curriculum are put together, how learning works, student-teacher relationships, things like that. And over the years, we've added more and more offerings such that we've now been able to make a category, which is pedagogy. And so there's lots of spaces and a list of courses that you can take to fulfill that requirement. A lot of them are 1 credit, so you may find that you fulfill this requirement with a full credit class. You also have to do a practicum. So this can either be a 4 credit experience, a half credit or a full credit class, or it can be some other experience like volunteer tutoring or working in Summer Bridge or some other kind of experience, as long as it gives you 20 hours of student contact. So if you're tutoring for West Reads, for West Math, Traverse Square, lots of other programs like that, as long as you add up to 20 hours of actually sitting with the student, not just waiting in an office, that can count. If you're TAing a language, a lot of times those experiences add up to enough practicum hours. And many service learning courses also offer sufficient practicum hours. So there's a lot of courses where you can combine your pedagogy and practicum requirement into a full credit course that covers both things. Pedagogy is addressed. The practicum component is addressed through service learning. They add up to 1 credit, and you can cross out both with a course, or you can divide these experiences and take a half credit or a full credit pedagogy course somewhere and then fulfill your practicum requirement a different way. We now have asked Amy Grillo to take on coordinating practicum experiences. She already teaches the Ed Studies practicum course, which is an intensive course where she places you into practicum experience based on your interests and goals. But even if you fulfill your practicum requirement in some other way, not through the practicum course, she's the point person for that. Pardon my phone. Okay. And then the last requirement is a senior seminar. So this is only for majors. It's for your cohort to sit and process and digest all of the things that you've learned in your first 7 semesters at Wesleyan. And we'll talk about guest speakers, we'll do some new readings, and we'll mull over material that you've covered in your other classes as a group. If you look at the minor, you can see familiar characters here, many of the same courses as for the major, but you don't have to do the 3 electives, you don't do the senior seminar, and you don't do broader contexts. So what's left is the gateway course, a foundations course, 3 breadth requirements, and the pedagogy and practicum duo. So some key takeaways. As you think about this, you can complete a linked major or a minor in education studies. The major requires 10 credits, the minor requires 5 credits, plus both require a practicum with a minimum of 20 student contact hours. If at any point you see a course that looks like it might fit a requirement, please check in with your advisor or with me or Professor Stemler or the co-chairs. We might add it to our list, or we might approve an override for you to count it. It's very easy to request an override. First of all, you can send us an email just to let us know about what the experience is or what the course is for which you're requesting an override. But when you go into your portfolio, once you've declared the major or the minor, you'll get that major or minor certification page. And you can use that to plan out how you're laying out your courses. And you can also use that certification page to request overrides. So say you took a developmental psychology course when you were on a study abroad program, and you want to use that instead of Psych 230. You can request your override there, and assuming that the course transferred in, it will show up on your list of options. So feel free to use that space to kind of communicate with us. There's a lot of different opportunities for practicum experiences. You can look at the Jewett Center for Community Partnerships, where they list volunteer opportunities, service learning courses. There's lots of summer programs, and if you're an Ed Studies major or minor, you'll be on our listserv, so you'll receive lots of announcements about opportunities like that. You could also go through the Career Center and just keep your eyes open for positions on Handshake that may be appropriate for a practicum, for example, for summer internships. If you have questions about the practicum requirement, you can email Professor Amy Grillo. If you have academic planning questions and you've declared education studies, you should have an education studies advisor assigned to you, and you could email them directly. And if you have any other questions at all, you can contact me or Professor Stemler. We're the Education Studies co-chairs. We're so excited to launch our very first year as a college, as a major, and we're going to do it with gusto and enthusiasm despite the incredibly strange times that this year finds us in. We hope you're well, and we look forward to seeing you virtually or in person in the fall.